Pauchi Sasaki, and I am a composer. I compose for acoustic instruments, but also for electronic music. And I am here at the Institute for Ideas and Imagination to work on my first opera called Artemis, which focuses on the great event that will take place in about 3 to 4 years. The first woman will arrive to the moon surface, but I also took the opportunity to use this project to reflect on this new era, no? That we are facing, the digital era, how it will be if we build this new digital world from a female perspective, whatever that means. I am here to think about that. So, yes, and you.
Yes, I'm Katharina Pistor. I teach at Columbia Law School, and I teach mostly in the area of financial law and corporate law, but also comparative law. But I've been working for a number of years on the idea that law is code and code is law. So a colleague at Harvard has written a book much earlier saying that code, the digital code, is law. And I have used the same metaphor to show that law, especially private law, contract law, etc., is really code. It's code for arranging our relations with one another. And I'm now working on a project together with somebody who is a computer scientist and an economist on a project we call Coded Power. So we're thinking about how control over the digital code can give you control over human data and can also be used to influence, manipulate, and control human behavior. So I think what you just said is you're trying to imagine a different way in which the code could be used, a feminine way in which it could be used. And we are despairing a little bit about the reversal of the code. So when you think back to the 1990s, many people in the world, especially the coders themselves, had all these hopes and these ideas and imaginations for how this technology could be used in a decentralized fashion, and how it has become so centralized and has become such a mode of control. That's why we're calling the project Coded Power. What happens when some can put their hands on something as powerful as a code, whether it's the legal code or whether it's the digital code.
Mm-hmm. We were talking the other day about how history repeats itself, no? Like 500 years ago, the great empires, no? Like England went and conquered many lands, France, Spain, no? And how this behavior is repeated until now, no? Like, I am the first arriving here, I am the owner. Mm-hmm. I will be the owner of these lands, and I will be the power of these lands, and I will have it all. I want to have it all. And then a lot of wars, and that's kind of the same scenario what happened then with internet, no? Like, we have these big companies, no? Like Facebook that then bought smaller businesses, and then we have Amazon, we have Twitter, we have these big companies that are like empires. And we have, of course, the emperors, who are the ones who design the code. They have their own law system, and there is no way to control them. So that was my first question for you. I know that it is difficult to control the code in the internet and the companies, but especially because they are at the end so international. Of course, they are based in, for example, in United States, but then how to rule something that is being used by the world, no?
Yeah, I think the strategy that we are developing and I'm thinking about is not so much trying to impose another control structure on a centralized control structure, because that would be even bigger and more controlling and could also be abused. We are thinking much more about how to decentralize control and how to make decentralized forms of control more resilient against capture by some. So I think this is where we meet in a way, because you're also thinking about how could it be different? And we have been going through history and thinking about the digital code, but we have also been thinking about our other times when certain important resources were very heavily centralized, but then were decentralized. So one example is the Bible, right? The church had controlled the Bible. It was taught only in Latin. Only the priests knew God's word. Only the church could say what is the truth. And then all of a sudden, people translated the Bible into the vernacular. Martin Luther into German. And at the same time, so this was a coincidence of two things. You translate into vernacular and you get the printing press. And then you print. And all of a sudden, every household has the Bible. And they can read it. And they can find God's word themselves, right? And it split the church. It split the church from below in the end. And that's sort of the metaphor, that's sort of the strategy that we're interested in. How can you decentralize fast, radically? And how can you make sure that we can protect that this decentralized structure is not being re-centralized? Because of course it has been in some ways. The Catholic Church came back and it reformed a little, and the Protestant Church too is much less decentralized than the idea was then, right? So I think there is a tendency in social systems to centralize, but we are thinking about how to make this more difficult.
What could be the translation in the digital world of this example that you just gave?
I think giving us, the data producers, control rights over our data.
And also I imagine education, no? And literacy, and maybe a need to teach young children to code also as an extra language they have to know in order to be free and empowered. No?
So I think it's that's essential, because we can control our own data only if we have some literacy in how to do this. We can design systems in a more consumer-friendly way, make it easy for people to make these choices. But people would also have to make these choices. For that, you also need to have education, how important it is that you control your own data, and you basically, make sure that you decide for yourself whether your data will be used by certain companies and not others. Whether we get together and say, yes, we want to share our health data for research, but we don't want to share them with our employers. And we not even want to share them with other employers, might not even be our own, so that they can create profiles of people like us. But we want to protect these data against capture. So to stop this harvesting of data. And one thing is really beautiful, and that's similar to the Bible. The Bible, when all of a sudden just understanding that actually the truth of God's word in the Bible, if you believe in the Bible, is different from what the priest told me, that just is like pop. The whole power of the church goes away, right? And the nice thing about our digital world is that 90% of the data today has been harvested over the last 3 years. And that has been true for the last 20 or 30 years. So this concentrated system can only exist in the future if it can continue its centralized control. And if we find ways to give controls to you and me and to your son and to others, we can actually pop it.
Is this possible? Is it possible the following scenario, that for example when I go to shopping to shop some food for my kid, I can tell if it has MGO, if it is high in sodium, if it is high in sugar. Would it be possible to have a future where every single website or application has a sign saying this is highly this is could be very harmful for your kid, has a high possibilities to generate anxiety, or like drug addictions, Do you see a future where
I think we could make it even simpler, because it takes a lot of time for you to read this little fine print, and it's very small, we know that too. But you could have a key in which you put in forever that you buy things for your kids only with certain characteristic. And then you see only those products.
Mm-hmm.
And no others can be bought through your electronic wallet. And you make this commitment for your kid early on. So you don't have to go through the search process every time, which is so time consuming. But the idea is basically giving control back to you means that you have to make commitments, and they have to be relatively sticky. I'm not saying irreversible, but they have to be very sticky. To say, I commit that my own data, location data, health data, what I do on different platforms, will not be shared with X, and will be shareable under certain conditions. Mm-hmm. So I will share them with, I don't know, NGOs or for certain purposes, health research, etc., but not for others. Mm-hmm. And when you enter these platforms, your key will protect you from this data being harvested by others. That's how it has to work, I think.
So the change has to come from the coding in order to be able to make those decisions.
It's coded power. Yeah, I think that change has to come from coding, and in this case has to come from the digital code. So, you asked me before, can we control the digital code basically through legal code? And the legal code, I think, is too weak in relation to the digital code. It's always too slow, always comes too late. And so this is why the digital code has wiggled out of control. Also the cryptocurrencies, all that stuff. It just happens too fast. But I think, so that's why we are thinking about how we can reorganize coded power and how can we decenter coded power.
And I am thinking a lot about the repercussions in the new generations of social media. There are many studies that show that, for example, in the last 10 years, the anxiety level from teenagers have raised like 134%, the depression 104 or 6% more, only in less than a decade. So if we see the curve is exponential, so it will grow, still be growing. What should be made in order to stop that curve? Because there we now have some studies showing that the like button, the share, the retweet are very damaging for teenagers, no, and for their self-esteem. Like 1 from 3 teen girls have affirmed that they wanted to commit suicide. So what could we do now? Because as you said, it is already kind of late, no? But we have now a generation who in 10 years will be in power, which spirit is broken. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, so I think 2 things. One is to help them, and then to make sure that the next generation doesn't have the same problems, right? And so how to help them, I think, is a combination certainly of therapy, of giving them other things also to do, and experiences to share lives with others that are not digital lives, to get out of this constant race for how many likes do you get, how many followers do you get. So I think we need alternative platforms where other things are being cherished, and they do exist, right? I left Twitter when Musk took over in October, and I went to Mastodon, and it's far less stressful. It's very boring, if you like. It's very, very nice because you have conversations if you want to have conversations. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. You also don't get as easily as many because nothing goes viral. They have written code that these things can't go viral. You can boost somebody, you can follow, sort of retweet, but you can't comment on that tweet. So you can't reinforce. And that was a conscious coding decision by the designers of these social media platforms. And how to make sure that teens are geared towards using platforms that are social. They're meant for social things. And people say things and you might disagree with them, but you won't punish them in a way, you won't go after them in a way that we have create through coding strategies. No? This was done. There's a purpose for making code that can go viral so easily. That sort of, you can sell products, you can sell ads, you know which ones, what mobilizes people. You can build on that and monetize that. That's behind that. We're in a capitalist society, and I think if we want to create alternative codes, we have to build them, and there are people who do this. And then I think the next question is how to make sure that kids have primarily access to the socially beneficial, the mentally and individually beneficial codes, and how we phase out the others. And so parents have to be involved, teachers have to be involved, the teens have to be convinced that value lies not in the number of followers, etc., but value lies in how you communicate with others, how you share your life with others.
So, what I was reading some articles, and I realized how a code is coding us in a very specific detail. Coding, by essence, doesn't allow error. If a code has a little error, it doesn't work. And so we are getting used to don't allow error in our reality, like cultural counseling or all the bullying that happens online. So it is coding us, the code is coding us. So in a way that now we don't believe in change, we don't believe in education, we don't believe that somebody can be a good person after having an error in his or her life. No, so now we are not tolerant anymore. We became machines in a sense that we don't allow things that are not correct, and so we have these waves of moralistic campaigns, or we have these waves of let's culture cancel this person. So I am worried about the metaphysical aspect of the human being in that sense, no? How flexible we are with reality, how flexible are between us, and really the code in the internet doesn't allow us to be that flexible how it is structured right now, because it's I like you or I just don't like you. No?
Yes. No, I think that's this is part of the coding strategies that have evolved, and I think they evolved for a particular purpose. And it's not to create a social network amongst humans to solve important social issues or just to have a good time. We are the objects of the big tech companies who are selling our communications and relations for money. And so the purpose of the code is that. And I think one side aspect, but I'm not sure whether it's so central, is you have to write code, and we're getting this idea that code is simple and everything's only binary. But that doesn't have to be like that, right? People also use coding technologies in very different ways. And I was just thinking maybe we should just switch gears a little bit and think about your feminine approach to coding. How else the world could look like, Because again, going back to the 1990s, there was a lot of hope that we would completely change this world. People would all become coders and do their own thing. And people communicated with others whom they've never met, and they were excited about it, right? And they were not going after, they were not trying to create conformity, but there was this space. And so I think the question for us is, do we see the possibility of a different world of code? And then I think the fundamental question then for me also as a lawyer is always how do we get from A to B? Given where we are, can you get there? But you also have to have the imagination, and I'm just hoping to learn from you what the imagination could look like.
Well, I think that it is very important, very pivotal for new generations to learn how to code, because it's the only way they will be conscious about what is really happening in their environment, that things are not it is always important that they have a critical sense of every single thing that they interact with. no? And if they don't know to code, they will be just consuming pre-designed products. So I think one first step is that, no? And the second one is to create platforms that are very transparent about the templates, no? When I was talking about the messages that we see on the food packages, no, like how the maybe there is a percentage or a way to know how closed is a code, the design of a code, or how open is the design of another code. No, for example, there are environments that people or games that they are very driven for a goal, no, so it is like very pre-designed, or there are other games that are open, like they just give the environment and then you make up something there, no, so that invites for the user to be creative, to engage from another way with another users, no, but also maybe something that I am struggling with is the way in social media we end up seeing the same things. No, that's the coding. No, and I wish there is a way to not to have that code. No, that how is possible that in my feed I see more things. I am from Peru. I see more things from Prince Harry than from people from the Amazon that is way near from my house. No, so it is like still we have this same structure from the globalization of the media, that we had these big companies, Fox, MTV, no, and then now we have the same logic now in the digital realm. Yes. So how to really see reality from the horizontal way without the framing of the people on power. Because the problem also is that now that the ads and the advertising online has dropped, now Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are desperate to charge, no, like for the verified sign, but also when you pay your monthly fee, they say openly that your tweet will be more noticeable. So at the end, we are replicating and perpetuating the chain of power. No, who has the money to pay exists. Yeah. The people who doesn't have the money or even a credit card to actually pay something online, they will never exist. So how we integrate the people that doesn't have access, but from with another practices, no, with new practices that can actually be nurturing for their communities, no, like talking about their own stories, their own language, sharing stories or myths from their cultures with other kids from other parts of the world. So that kind of projects that actually gives voice, no, a coding that gives voice without going into the chain of power, no? Would that be possible?
Technically, yes. No? That's the irony, right? Mm-hmm. Technically, yes, because the information technology is so cheap. Everybody has an iPhone. Everybody can film something. All the pictures from Peru, even of remote villages, could be uploaded somehow. Now, there is a point where things become a bit more expensive and we have to think about the funding, right? Because you have to clean data, you have to keep the code working, you have to think about storage of data, but which could also be shortened, right? Most of the data that's currently being stored is not used by anybody. It's just being stored for storage. We don't need all that. So we could think of also about more smaller but interoperable systems where people can then also decide how to share. So I think the problem is not technology. It's very often the case in human history, right? The problem is not science, the problem is not technology, the problem is not overcoming natural problems. The problem is social power and how to deal with social power. And so this is why I've been studying law as a source of social power for a long time, and I can see how it's entrenched in the hands of asset holders, in the hands of lawyers, highly paid lawyers, much less in the hands of legislators today than it used to be. So it shifts as well. What I find so fascinating about the digital code, and I'm not a digital coder, this is why I work with others on these topics, but is that you could actually decentralize control over the code, and you need to solve some fundamental issues. You have to solve the issue of who controls what information is shared with others. You have to sort out some of the funding issues. How do you make sure that the system works? But you can get it for much cheaper than we're currently having. I mean, many of this new social media networks that I'm using, they also ask you voluntarily to pay a fee if you want, and some do, some others don't. They have lots of volunteers who work. It's now a big network. It's not as big as Twitter, but many Twitter users have migrated. So I think we need much, much more of this, and we need people to spend time and try it out and encourage them to use their creativity to work on that. So I think we have to create this alternative universe, and we have to think how to encourage many through education, through making it easy to switch, to partake in those social media rather than stick in basically in the system where you become the object of, you've been monetized, your relations are being monetized for other purposes, and people have to learn that and understand that and then rethink how to use them.
And also to create maybe codes that foster communion, no, and deeper relationships, no, because something that also is a sickness from nowadays is that relationships on the internet became very superficial, no. Yeah. So how to code a platform, how to code a website that actually fosters or allows deeper connections and the creation of longer thoughts, no?
Yeah, no, I think technologically it would be possible. I think the question is whether we can, we make the effort, and whether I think one of the problems with the existing technologies is that they're so addictive, and they're designed to be addictive, and it's hard to escape addiction. We know this from drug abuse, how many people just fall into the trap of that, and it's also hard to raise children to protect them from all kinds of addictions, including the addiction to social media. But I think they're purposefully designed for that. And for me, the first step would be to backtrack from that, and to offer social media where, and as you said, one can create code that allows others to participate. I'm also thinking about your electronic music. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're playing with code yourself in creating music.
Behaviors.
And behavior of what sounds are being created, but in a very creative way. And I think it's part of what you said before, the education question, and also showing children, small children already, what they can do, not just giving them an iPad. That makes them addicted to this particular way in which we use social media. But showing them how they can use the digital code for something much more fun.
Resignify the tool.
Yeah.
No? Instead of become a passive user, to be an active user of the tool, no? I showed you the short film we shot with my husband. It is called Entio, and it depicts how technology arrived to this little village in the Amazon rainforest, and the problems that are these technologies generating, because now the kids are super addictive to TikTok, and they are in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. They are watching TikToks from famous influencers and reggaeton all night long, and they don't want anymore to help at their houses. They don't want to sing their old songs and chants. They also don't want to keep talking their language. The languages are dying literally in this particular town, they speak Huachipeira and Machigenga, and they sing a very beautiful chant which is called Eshua, that maybe there are only 20 to 30 people that they sing these millenarious chants that is disappearing in front of us. No, so the problem is when you give a tool and you don't guide the usage.
Yes, because you could have also used the tool to share that local culture, their beautiful songs with others. Right?
Yes.
It could have been the reverse, but that's not how it's being used. And I think for us the most important thing is to figure out how we can reverse, how we can decenter, and how we can empower. It's a question of power, how we also can empower individuals, the young but also the elderly. I watched the little video, and the old doctor or medicine person there, I mean, she probably doesn't want to learn digital code, but she has so much knowledge. And she even said, I don't share this anymore because I don't think they appreciate what I have to offer, right? And so finding ways in which we can at least record and preserve a little bit, I think it's part of human history also that many cultures and languages die out, unfortunately. But at the same time, with the digital media, we have the opportunity to create a much more colorful picture of all of us and present to the world the diversity. It doesn't cost that much, no? It's not a money question, really.
No.
It's certainly not a technological question.
In that sense, for example, the decision to bring the iPads or the tablets was from the government in the context of COVID. Kids couldn't go to schools, teachers couldn't go to the town. So here also there was a lack of guidance from the government. Which is your hope from governments? Do you have some hope in this complicated scenario?
I mean, I wish they were more thoughtful. I think we have to be realistic, is that the big companies have much greater access to most governments most of the time. And so their mindset, their own ideas about the digital world are very much formed by those who have created the problems for us. And it's hard to get a foot in the door. One of my colleague with whom I'm working, he has tried during COVID to propose to governments in the EU or the OECD and others contact tracing technology that would protect us from our data being then shared with everybody else, right? And you can do contact tracing without exposing us to this privacy intrusion. And these new coders were never heard. Well, the companies were heard were Microsoft and Apple and etc. So that makes it difficult to hope for the government. I'm not excluding that there's some, and sometimes you have good, also technically educated people within government that want to do things. But I think one has to find technical solution, then mobilize people and say, this is what we want to do. And then the government hopefully can step in and protect these spaces against intrusion and destruction by the forces that we know again.
It's very sad to see how in so many different scenarios, at the end, the ones who get to use the law as a tool are the ones who have more power and money, no? Because I was very surprised the other day. We were talking when you were explaining me that in United States a corporation actually has human rights. And I was like, how in the world that happens, while in Peru, for example, right now a lady from Puno doesn't have any right. None right, no? They received gases, they are killing people, and they don't have rights at all. They cannot make use of this tool. So in translation to the digital world, it will be the same in the future, no? That everything will be digitized, no?
Yes, but I think maybe I'm naive, and and I don't want to say that technology has the answers for us, but the beauty of the digital code is that, as you said before, we can educate everybody to become a coder. In theory, we can educate everybody to become a lawyer, but the law is a much more centralized system. No? It's about Yes.
circles.
Yes, and the way it certainly has evolved and is now entrenched and institutionalized, it's a very centralized system. It's going to be very difficult to break that. But we're doing more and more things through digital coding. In the worst case scenario, through smart contracts, right? So there is a project, of course, on the way, many projects on the way to develop capitalism further in the digital age. But I think the technology as such could also be used for something else. And what I like about the digital code is its decentralized potential. It's not that we have realized it, but it has this potential, continues to have it, because the control through digits comes through control over data and collecting our data. And if we can break that cycle, I think we have a chance.
And the cycle can be broken as a human history therapy, no? Can be broken if we change our behavior.
Yes.
Which is ambition.
Yes.
Like things, going back to the example of the conquer of America, Asia, no, everything was driven by ambition and endless, no? And that's what is happening also in the digital world now. But if we have a spirit of coding that is not driven by ambition, but by commonwealth,
sharing and commonwealth,
yes, it could be a different reality, no? It could become a different world, no?
That's the hope.
Yeah. Daydreaming.
Exactly.
Daydreaming. As I mentioned before, I love to analyze the life of Einstein, and he had these thought experiments. Someone would think that the great ideas came from mathematics or physics equations, but really they came from imagining a future or a situation, no? And that's how he came up with his great findings. So sometimes we don't allow ourselves to imagine, no, possible scenarios. So that's very important, and that's also very beautiful that we are here. No?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what this institute allows us to do, to imagine.
Yes.
No?
Yeah. Thank you, Katharina.
Thank you, Pauchi.
Thank you.